Ato isn't on the line right now, but we're expecting him to join us. Oh, he's joined. Okay, he just joined. So Ato is the director of Ghana Think Foundation. He's also a
Hello,
social
everyone.
entrepreneur. Hello, Ato. Ato, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Ato, can you hear us?
I can hear everyone.
Okay, we've been expecting you. Good of you to join us. So to start the ball rolling, Foster, my first question directed to you. You've groomed a lot of startups over the years, being the president of Hack Lab Foundation and also working in an incubation hub with SB Incubator. What are some of the challenges or concerns about startups that you'd like to share with us?
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity to share in this forum. So, over the period, the Hakla Foundation has focused on bridging the gap between industry and academia. And our primary role has been facilitating extracurricular activities uh, as a supporting system to the academic requirements that students have to complete. And unfortunately, these requirements do not increase the employability of these students as they end up being square pegs in round holes by the time they move out of school into industry. So what we've been doing over the period is getting innovative in how we leverage mass open online courses through partnership with several other industry players to design programs that help close the skills gap that these industries need. And that is basically what we've been evolving, overdoing year on year to support the entrepreneurial ecosystem as well as to close the gap between industry and academia. Um, Key things that we've seen as challenges has been with regards to uh, the commitment of our beneficiaries to follow through programs all the way to the end. It's one thing to excite them, it's another thing to sustain the excitement through the program to the end. And that is one of the challenges we've seen over the period trying to support them. Other the other key challenges we realize is soft skills, right? Having the technical know-how of, let's say, how to write a code or how to build a website is not enough to work in an organization. You would typically need a few other skills and to be able to navigate your way through organizations. If I am hiring someone, I'll look out for someone who has a strong uh, self leadership skill. That means the person requires little supervision to be able to deliver, and that person is able to commit to activities and see them through to the end. Someone who is innovative and thinks out of the box, someone who knows how to communicate effectively and present their ideas in a way that he or she is able to get buy-in from the entire group of people they are working with. Someone who tolerates other people in terms of their backgrounds, their culture, their traits, etc. So these are some of the things that most of the people we try to support lack, right? And so juxtaposing that to startups, startups need people to work with them, and they need people who they can afford to work with to move faster. Most startup founders have redefined the term CEO as Chief Everything Officer. That means as an entrepreneur, you have to have the skill of many to be able to move, bootstrap your way through till you build leverage enough to raise funding for your startups. And a lot of these people we train have two options, either to become employees or to become employers. And so, if you choose the route of being an employee, the initial challenges I mentioned are what you face. If you choose the route of becoming an employer, you face the challenge of finding the right skill set to feed your organization, or you face the challenge yourself as an entrepreneur to have the right skill set to move your idea into something viable that will have leverage and attract people to commit and invest in what you are doing. These are some of the challenges that we tend to see supporting the beneficiaries we work with.
Okay, thank you very much, Foster, for the insight. And Freda. Hello, Freda. Is Freda on the
Are
call?
you said, yes, I am.
Okay. You are the technical advisor on the committee drafting the bill for the Startup Policy Act. We would like to know what exactly the bill is all about, what it's supposed to entail, and what we should expect from the bill when it's passed to become an act.
So that's a long question, but I think first let me just clarify a few things from a semantics perspective, because I noticed you mentioned it a policy act, and those are two different things. So a policy really sets sort of the strategic objective of what a government is trying to do. We have a Ghana entrepreneurship policy, for instance, already. However, an act really defines specifically what is expected, and it is something that is enforceable. So a policy can change with governments, but an act is a law that will stay and remain constant over the years across different governments. And a startup act in particular is one that bundles many different incentives together to support entrepreneurs, some of which Foster has already alluded to. Right now, since it is not yet passed, we are calling it a bill. So we can refer to it as the Ghana Startup Bill. So I just wanted to clarify that for those who may be confused around whether it's a policy or an act and a bill and all that. So as I said, this bill proposes a number of different areas to address the challenges that entrepreneurs are facing. So the initiative started, about 2 years ago, 2019, with a number of different organizations coming together over the years. And we went around the country to engage them and understand some of the challenges that they came up with. We had about 9 or so different areas, everything from finance to taxes to registration to access to market. And so throughout the process at i4Policy, we had also been researching some of the different solutions that other countries have used to support their entrepreneurs. We were part of the process in helping to develop the Senegalese Startup Act. And so we were able to bring a lot of that research to bear into the Ghana Act, the Ghana Bill. And so this particular bill is tackling 8 different areas. We're looking at, I won't go into detail right now unless you want me to, but it's overall, it's looking at incentives for taxation, for financing, such as a startup fund. How do we also increase investment, for instance? How do we help entrepreneurs gain access to market in terms of competition, getting government contracts? We're looking at insolvency, and that means many of our startups fail, right? I think it's like 80% of startups fail. But we don't hear about them. They don't seek for help or all those things. So how do we make the process less complicated if someone has to, let go of their business and start afresh? We also looking at employment. Foster mentioned that, many of the entrepreneurs don't have the skills they need because they're not at the point where they can hire yet. So we're looking at potentially how do we support startups with, perhaps a stipend to hire key staff for a year? How do we match recent graduates from SHS to startups? How do we encourage women in STEM and non-traditional fields? How do we support also the incubators and accelerators that are supporting these startups? We're also looking at intellectual property and research and development. Many startups mentioned that they don't have support in this area. So we're looking at, support with market intelligence. We're looking at technical support for those who need, patenting or specific engineering and development assistance. And then we're also looking generally at business support and capacity building. We have a lot of other actors in the system, your incubators, your accelerators, your co-working spaces who are sort of playing different roles in supporting startups. We also need to, well, one, streamline them. So how do we streamline and make sure that those who are there are actually providing the right services? But then also, once we do that, how do we train them and build their capacity to support entrepreneurs? And then finally, I would say, the process is cumbersome, right? Starting a business is cumbersome. You have to go to Registrar General, FDA, Ghana Standards Authority, here. We are proposing, the development of a dedicated Ghana Startup Desk that is at the existing Registrar General centers and other business centers, but also, an online portal where some of these processes can be integrated and facilitated in one place, like a one-stop shop. So that's a high-level overview, but I can go into further detail as we progress.
Okay, thank you very much. And before we move on, if you have any questions or suggestions or comments, you can simply drop them in the comments box and I get to attend to you when we are done with the show. So, Ato, I'm moving on to you now. Based on what Foster said and what Freda said the startup bill is all about, what do you expect to see in the draft when it's completed?
Wow. Okay. I expect? I expect to see things that have been crowdsourced, right? I think one of the best things about this is that Frida and the team behind this have had a lot of workshops and consultations. So consultations with stakeholders, experts, people who work in this space, workshops with people who are in the space or are affected by the startup, ecosystem or space. So I expect something that is very comprehensive, something that is popular with young people because they have contributed to this, and something that can be something that would be sustainable, right? That even as the years go by, because of the kinds of people who are involved in this and what they know and the trends and what they see happening and what they see happening in other countries, it would be something that can outlive a long number of years. Yeah. For the nitty gritty of what's going to be in the bill, I can't really tell. But I think definitely, people would be interested in, policies that help startups do better, right? Not so much, obviously we've talked about, them being able to get government contracts. For me personally, that's not what I think the priority should be. I think what the priority should be is that there are policies in Ghana that allow new companies or startups or people who are, solving problems that traditionally are not being solved to be able to solve it better in Ghana and from Ghana. So I hope that, that would be in there. And one other thing that someone raised when I was sharing information about this program earlier in a Connect group was that the bill should be easy to implement, right? Because we've seen
Yeah.
several laws and bills and policies, by our governments, in years past. People say that we have very good laws in Ghana, but implementing them is the challenge. right? So maybe the challenging implementing
Yeah.
the political will, it's different reasons. But for me, I want to see something that is easy to implement. I think that's my number one thing for this bill. It should be easy to implement. Yeah, so that the same people, young people who are complaining about what our governments have been doing, would have less of a reason to complain about this bill when it comes out.
Okay. Thank you very much. And Foster. Hello, Foster.
Yeah, yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay, you're still here. We would like to know, how do you think this bill, when passed to become an act, how do you think is going to affect or impact our entrepreneurship ecosystem in Ghana and our tech ecosystem as well?
Well, great. Um, the question really is, why are we having this conversation right now, right? All the businesses that have long existed, who existed as startups before they became corporates, right? So it puts me in a position where I have to go back and rethink what exactly is the role of the Startup Act supposed to do. And I'd like to take
A
us
bit
back a
louder.
little
We
bit.
can't really.
Can you
Hello,
hear me?
Foster.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's better. Yeah, it's better now.
Great. So I believe that government exists as a mother body to both the private sector and the public sector, right? And basically, the public sector sort of creates, runs, and sustains like a platform, like a national level platform to a large extent at the macro level. And the private sector sort of creates, runs, and sustains ventures on these platforms, right? So government in this case is like a shopping mall with some shops in it, and the private sector are the tenants in this shopping mall. And whatever the landlord says is what goes. So startups have long existed, like I mentioned earlier. Every large company that existed, that currently exists today, evolved from being a startup to what it is today. So before, when the population wasn't that much, it meant that the economies of scale favored the population and majority of the people served in public sector. But the private sector and the public sector could accommodate that much, right? But today the population has increased drastically, and the private and informal sector are absorbing the rest of the population. So a majority of them currently serve in those areas. But there's still a high rise in unemployment, and there's limited room for government to generate internal funds to support a lot of the development work and broaden that platform, that national platform, to allow more people to thrive and survive, right? So people are forced to go into entrepreneurship, and that's basically self-initiative to survive. And so there's that rising new type of startup that is causing us to have this conversation right now. And
Yeah.
these new that types of startups have certain types of problems that did not exist before when our current giant companies existed before, when they started as startups. And so we are being forced to really think about how do we help control this rapidly growing sector of self-starters or self-initiatives. A large number of people end up dying. A large number of startups end up dying because they don't have access to finance or the right financing and access to market. And so the subject which Freda mentioned earlier about getting government contracts, there are so many red tapes that these red tapes existed to regulate the businesses that existed long before. But today, because there are there are new businesses with new innovative ways of doing things, they stand a chance of outcompeting the old or traditional or legacy businesses that existed before and the way they did things. And they are able to scale faster and employ more people and create more jobs and end up impacting the rest of the people and generating more income for the government through taxes. So for me and for the people I serve, I believe this policy is there to help us. Would this act will come in to help define who a startup or an SME is, so that we are able to
Yeah.
see this person and say, okay, per our categorization, this is where you fall. Now, once you have that clearance, it's like for you to enter a space, if it is a highly secured facility, you need an ID card that identifies you. And once they are able to see that ID card, they can say, okay, granted, these are the privileges you have based on the ID card level you hold. And that is basically what this act is supposed to help us do: identify who a startup is and be able to provide the right interventions for them. Create instruments that accommodate financing for these asset class, create incentives to attract foreign direct investments into these businesses, and also encourage local investors to go into these areas. The reason why a number of people or corporations are not even considering their CSR budget as a priority for startup areas is because there's no incentive, right? If they rather donate it to creating boreholes, all these are equally important. But when you look at the ripple effect of some of these, you realize that, okay, if a large number of people were employed, they could have afforded to buy potable or connect potable water to their homes, right? So it's about prioritization as well. We can design this lovely act, but depending on who is in power and what his priorities are and his ideologies are leaned towards, it will determine whether this act becomes relevant or not. So for my people and the people I serve, I believe that bridging that gap between industry and academia also comes to the fact that if students decide to commercialize their projects or start initiatives from school, gaining access to market means the industry opening up their procurement policies to allow for these identified or defined types of businesses to gain access to compete or bid for some of these projects without being asked, do you have 3-year audited finance? Do you have a board? Do you have an accountant, a CFO? Do you have X number of people with 10 years minimum experience? If you don't, then we don't think you are capable in delivering this job. And these are basically the red tapes that kill most of the ventures in terms of gaining access to market. So we can do all the training we want to do, but the training, it's only the beginning of the journey. It's just to make them capable enough to receive the resources or give whoever has confidence in them to invest. And investing in them is not enough, because when you give them the money and they don't have the market to serve, then they can't return your money with interest on it. So all these go in tandem, and that is basically what I would love to see in that policy in terms of enabling not just the startups, but incentivizing the other players who would participate in making these startups sustainable.
Thank you, Foster, for that insight as well. And Frida, would like you to go a bit more into detail, specifically on the advantage that small enterprises are going to gain in terms of legal framework and then advancement in technology. How is this bill going to help leverage technology?
Okay, so I think maybe I can just backtrack a little bit, since before I even get to your question, because both Foster and Ato have raised some really good points. So let me just backtrack by starting with the objective of the bill, which is that we need as a country. We know there's a lot of unemployment. We know a lot of companies are facing challenges, and we need wealth, we need economic growth, we need more jobs, right? So the objective of this law or this bill is that it is to bundle a number of different incentives Foster was talking about, to support the creation of enterprises to create these jobs, but also to increase creativity, innovation, the use of new technologies, because we want to be having startups that aren't just competitive here in Ghana, but also globally competitive. In case anybody doesn't know what startups are, the difference is between startups and SMEs and MSMEs. Let me just quickly lay that groundwork as well. You know, in Ghana, we have 2.1 million businesses who are categorized as micro, small, medium, or enterprises, right? And together they create about maybe 7 million jobs, right? A majority of them, 80% of them, are micro businesses, are one-man businesses. Maybe 15% of them are small businesses, and about 4% of them are medium-sized businesses. But why do we need startups? Startups are usually the types, when you think of a startup, you think of maybe WhatsApp, Uber, Instagram. These are type of businesses that we think have the potential for growth and innovation. So they may start small, but they move fast and they disrupt the way business is done, and they have the potential to grow and employ more. So these are the types of businesses we're talking about when we're talking about startups. But as I mentioned, you know, Ghana has 80% of our small MSMEs are one-man businesses, right? So we can't just take the Western definition of a startup and just run with it like that. We have to contextualize it for our own environment, right? And so what happened is that working with some of the organizations that already exist, you know, as Ato mentioned, we have consulted with a number of different organizations. We've consulted with at least 600 entrepreneurs so far, and there's still more. You know, we are working, there's a technical working group that is made up of 7 different organizations, 3 of which are umbrella organizations for startups. So the Ghana Chamber of Young Entrepreneurs, Ghana Startup Network, Ghana Hubs Network, IFA policy included, and NEIP. For, you know, NEIP is focused on startups with the presidential pitch trainings, and previously what was the Ministry of Business Development. So we came together and we said, okay, so let's talk about what is the Ghanaian startup? How do we define the Ghanaian startup? And through our conversations with entrepreneurs, we came to the conclusion that this bill would define the Ghanaian startup as any legal entity. So that includes, you know, all the different categories in Register General that is less than 8 years old legally, right? That has employees within the current SME limits defined by NBSSI, that is less than 100 employees, whose annual sales, you know, a turnover balance sheet is within, again, the small enterprise limits, which is like, let's say almost 6 million cedis or less. That's a lot, actually, it gives room. We want a company that is greater percentage of Ghanaian owned, like Ato mentioned. Of course, that it has potential for growth and job creation, and that it's innovative, to your point. What does innovative mean? Not just tech, right? Tech is important, but there are other types of companies who can use other technology, right, to develop, produce, or commercialize products or services in a sustainable way, right? So as long as there's an element of innovation, this is the sort of this is the type of organization that we're looking at. So so that I just wanted to set that stage. And then I think your question, if I'm correct, had to do with more the technology aspect of it.
Yeah, digital.
The digital. So again, I said we didn't want to be too restrictive in terms of that, but what we did provide for in terms of technology is you know, linkages to existing organizations in Ghana who are providing these type of support. So MESTI has a policy out where it is working to develop a number of initiatives for technical training, for support. And we want to be able to link into that and work with them to do that kind of training. We are also talking about support in terms of funding innovation, right? A lot of the times, be it engineering or specific tech, people don't have financing to fund some of the research that they need to do. So the startup fund, for instance, has a sub-fund dedicated to innovation, tech transfer, technology transfer, especially from the universities, right? So we have a lot of wonderful ideas coming out of our universities that never get the light of day. So how do we facilitate commercialization of such projects from universities, TVET, so on, to bring them to the market? So the innovation part of that fund will also cater to that. So yeah, so it's a bit more broad. It's not specific to tech, but it caters to having resources for intellectual property and funding of innovation and R&D.
All right. Thank you very much, Freda. And Ato. Hello, Ato. Hello, Ato.
You can go ahead. I can always hear you.
Ato, are you on the call, please? Okay. Okay, sure. Thank you very much. Now, we would like to know your opinion on how startups can empower themselves or how they can upskill themselves to take advantage of this opportunity.
Okay. So I want to respond to something quickly that Foster talked about around the whole like startups should have this and that and 10 years minimum experience and things like that. Um, I don't know. I feel like sometimes startups have to understand that other startups have come before them, right? And they have faced similar challenges in the past. And because of those challenges, or because they came before them, they are 10 years old, they are 5 years old, they are 7 years old, right? So in some cases, if people are looking for companies to do something and they are looking for a certain level of experience, they are very much in their rights to look for that, right? Because they want to ensure that these startups have a good track record to be able to deliver what the government wants or somebody else wants. Around that, one of the things that most startups have done in the past that I think newer startups need to learn about is doing and having consortiums, right? Because as a 2-year-old, 3-year-old company, there are many things that you might not be able to do at scale, or you might not have the capacity to do it. And what we have to understand is that, especially for government and for some of these institutions, they want things done at scale. This is something for 10,000, 100,000 people. It's not for 100, right? So I think startups need to understand some of these things, appreciate where people are coming from with these things so that they can see how they can solve that, okay? So I think the consortiums are really important, where you can combine with other startups or other companies to be able to deliver something bigger. Again, maybe the startups are doing something that is, very novel that other startups that are older are not doing, which is something that startups need to think about, right? Something that's very novel. So in that case, the startups need to be able to show how can they deliver that, right? Take out all the bribery and corruption and bad things, procurements that we see in governments. Take that all out, right? You still have to be able to show how you can get the job done. Okay, so I think that's something that we need to think about more. And, so the other thing is that once you're a startup, how do you build traction very quickly? Because if I'm the person in government, I'm not going to give you, a contract if you can't show me traction, if you can't show me a track record, me Ato Ulzen-Appiah, right? So that's something that people need to look at and think of doing, and, stop I mean, fine, we all complain, but it's important for us to understand why certain things happen and understand how to solve those things, right? The complaining won't help. Let's understand, and then let's come up with solutions so that we don't have to complain. Yeah. So, I mean, I think and this is not only, about like startups that are based in Greater Accra region, right? It's for startups all over the country, right? So think about decentralization, think about district assemblies, think about regional directorates, right? How can we work more closely with those people in those regions for a startup that is based there? Okay, because sometimes not all decisions, um, on the government level or even for a big multinational are made at headquarters or are made, in the nation's capital. Sometimes people in WA can make a decision, right? Um, I want to give a quick example of John Kolok. He runs Kolok Soft in Bolgatanga, right? And he's figured out how to provide solutions for people in the Upper East region so they don't have to go and find someone in Accra or Tamale to do it, right? So these are things that we have to be thinking about as startups, right? We are startups, we are supposed to be innovative, okay? So we should sometimes, figure out how can we solve in spite of all the issues we always like to talk about. Okay, so that would be what I want to share. I don't know if I addressed your question adequately.
Yeah, you did address it, and thank you very much. Now we have a few more minutes left to wrap up. So as a reminder, if you have any question or comment, kindly drop it in the comment box and our guest will attend to you. Frida, our final question goes to you. We on based on our research, we realized that the whole drafting process is in 6 folds. We'd like to know what stage the committee is at currently and when we should expect it to be finalized.
Yeah, thank you. So that's a difficult question because we can't answer that question fully. Currently, the bill is in draft form, and we are in planning stages to expand the consultation process on the bill. So as I said, we've already begun some minus the 600 we started with. Once the bill was being developed, we've actually gone through 3 rounds of stakeholder consultation already with both government and entrepreneurs. We want to Ato's point, everything is not in Accra, so we would like to branch out and go into the regions and get more feedback on this 4th version of the draft. And so the organizations that I mentioned who are on the working committee, the Ghana Hubs Network, Ghana Startup Network, Ghana Chamber of Young Entrepreneurs, Private Enterprise Foundation, AFEP, and many of them have links to even more entrepreneurs. And so we'll be developing the process of getting more feedback in the regions, and also publicly, right, through media. So that's what we're working on at the moment. Once that consultation process is complete, then we will look into getting this tabled in Parliament. We've also had to hold, as you know, with the change of government, ministries being vetted and all that. So that has also put a hold on it. So unfortunately, I can't give you a concrete timeline on when that will be complete, but obviously our target is to have that completed before the end of this year, and hopefully have it to Parliament before the end of the year. But again, it's something that the team is working on.
Frida,
yeah.
can I ask a quick question? I just talked about the social enterprise policy that SE Ghana has been working on, and it's taken a very long period of time.
Yes.
What gives you confidence that this one would happen sooner?
That's a tricky question. I think the reason that we are confident in this particular one is because We're working very closely with NEIP, and NEIP has been a champion throughout the process. We are also engaging some of the other actors, obviously NBSSI, the Ministry of Trade, former Ministry of Business Development. I think it will be rolled into Ministry of Trade. So we are engaging them. They're with us throughout the entire process. It's not like we are somewhere crafting an act and then are going to bring it to government. They are in the process. They are giving us guidance. And so that gives us a little bit of confidence. We also have some of the support of donors helping us. We have, GIZ, Konrad Adenauer Stift Tank, World Bank. So we have a lot of people who are engaged in the process, and we're hopeful that with, all the right actors, private sector, government, donors, that we'd be able to push it through. I think there's a strong appetite for it. Also, government is quite concerned about the plight. I'm not government, so I'm not pretending to be speaking on government's behalf, but from what I understand, they do want to address the needs of young people. They see it as very important, and so it's something that is a priority for them anyway. It's not something that we're coming to add on top of what they're already doing. It's already something. The objective is actually something that came out of the medium-term strategy, as well as was also in the entrepreneurship policy that was approved last year. So it's a direct development that came out of the policy. So it's something they're already working on. So that's why we're confident. But as always, these processes, I'm glad that you said, I laughed a little bit when you said it should be easily implementable, because I don't think any of these legislations are easily implementable, just because of how many actors are involved in the process. One, we know from experience in Senegal that this process, they went through about more than 20 revisions, and it took almost a whole year to get to a place where many of the actors were comfortable with it. So we have to be aware that it takes time. And then also, implementation, the devil is in the details. We anticipate that all of the organizations we're currently working with, especially NEIP, will be championing the implementation of some of these. But there are also a lot of tentacles, right? Many of the incentives in the proposed bill, rely on many of the existing actors. If you're talking about procurement, is a procurement authority. If you're talking about, exports, investment, you have GEPC. So the coordination is going to be something that is going to take a lot of work. So we have to set our expectations on how it's going to be implemented, but it is definitely something that we have, the team has in mind, and we'll be hoping that our government champions also will be considering as we move forward.
Okay, thank you, Freda. We'd now take your final comments, then read out the questions from other people on this Zoom call. So Foster, the final comments, please.
All right. So it's pretty much an exciting time to be a Ghanaian and to be African. For the first time in the history of Africa, the dream Kwame Nkrumah had is going to become a reality with the CFTA coming into force. And for us, I see this conversation.
Foster, hello. Can you please speak a bit louder? We can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's better now. Thank you.
Yeah, for me, I see this conversation as a very timely one, stirring and educating the key people who are supposed to participate in this activity. I think it is good that the youth are the ones leading this conversation, because We can't leave our future for a generation that will die before we see the results of this lead the conversation. And I urge as many people here in this forum to actively participate and contribute in their regard, and also pass the message on to others who may not be privy to this information as ambassadors of sharing the right information, because we are also facing a challenge of false information circulating through politicking and propaganda. So
Hello. Hello, Foster.
I think we lost him.
Okay, since we lost Foster, Frida, the final word, so we move to Ato.
No, I think it's, it's an exciting opportunity that we have. One of our whole ideas or biggest passions at I4 Policy is, the co-creation of policy. We believe that there's no one particular actor that is responsible. Like, we all need to work together. And so this has been an exciting opportunity to work with entrepreneurs, the government, the private sector, the donors, together to create the solutions that we need. And I think that's really important, this whole process of co-creation. A lot of the times you think of, when you think of government and citizens, there's always like, we both have issues with each other. Like, we're all complaining, government is not doing this, government is not doing that. But through the process of co-creation, it's like we are partners in the process, right? We are building the solutions together. And so I think that's what we are most excited about. And of course, again, the difficulty will be in the implementation. But we hope that if we continue this approach of co-creation, even if we can get the bill to pass, even after that process, government will keep entrepreneurs and entrepreneur organizations engaged also in the implementation process, so that we learn as we go. If this isn't working, we change it, and keep going and improving, continuously improving. So I'm excited about it.
Okay, thank you very much. And Ato, the 10, please.
Yeah, so my favorite minister in this current government is Ibrahim Awal Mohammed. Simply because I think his ministry worked a lot with non-government actors to get things done in this country. So for me, I've seen before NEIP, we saw youth enterprise support. We've seen different programs like NEIP. And NEIP for me is far the best of those programs. So I want to continue, or I want to see government continue to work. And one of the main reasons why I think they've been successful is because they've worked a lot with private actors, right? They worked a lot with the business and tech hubs. They've worked with different organizations that are into startup things. Maybe it's because the government doesn't understand it much, so they intentionally worked with them. But we can see that in other ministries as well. So for me, I want to give NEIP a quick shout out, and I want them to continue to do great work. And the other thing I wanted to add was, for the implementation to work, they have to do something similar, right? They should think of this as we should think of this as a PPP, a public-private partnership, where we involve the private sector all along the implementation. That's going to make this easier, right? I believe so. Or let's try it. Okay. And then the other thing I wanted to add is that, the private sector, we hear people say private sector is the engine of growth.
Yeah.
I want the government to do things to make sure that no one in the private sector will come and say, people say the private sector is the engine of growth and we don't see it. right? This is my charge to government agencies that are involved in this. I mean, for Freda and her team, and I think the last point I wanted to add is we need to have those who understand these things work on these things for Ghana, not politicking or finding someone to come and do it, right? We need to find, and Freda and all the people who are involved in this, they know this and they are working on it. So for me, it's great to see this, and I hope we'll continue to see more of this so that we can implement. But Freda, thanks so much for helping us understand why some of these things take long. And hopefully we can do this faster than Tunisia and Senegal did. So thank you.
It's a competition now.
Well, it's just for God. Well, I don't know if it's competition per se, but we need this quicker.
Yes.
We need a sense of urgency for our development. So hopefully we can do it faster. Moving to everyone.
Okay. Thank you, Ato. We have a few comments and questions here that I'll be reading out. Most are directed to Freda, since you are directly on the team spearheading this bill. So the first one is, what happens if a startup can't scale after 10 years? Is there a cycle to allow a rebound?
I'm assuming this person is talking about in context of the act, because the act is defining a startup as a company that is less than 8 years old legally. So if once you hit 8 years old, you're no longer eligible for the benefits in the act, right? Of course, there are other programs that might support you, but not the items in the act. So if you're not rebounding, if you're not scaling after 8 years, then unfortunately you probably have to rely on capacity building, or maybe it's really time for you to reconsider if the product or service that you have from your startup is really ready for the market. Does the market really need it? There are a number of factors to consider if your organization is not rebounding. But if after 10 years if it's not showing signs of growth, then you have a problem.
Okay. And the second one reads, where can we get more information about this bill?
There is a website, Ghana Startup. I think it's GhanaStartupAct.org. I'll have to just double check that. There's also a Facebook group. If you just look at Ghana Startup Act, there's a Facebook group that you can join. We will continue to post updates both on the website and on the Facebook group. Eventually, we hope to post. We are not hiding the bill. We're just working on the consultation process. But we hope to eventually have the bill on the website so that everybody can have access to it and see it and comment on it and all that. So don't worry.
Okay, and I think this has already been answered, but it was still asked. So let me just repeat it. Sure. The mention of Parliament makes me think this may stall. What's the assurance against this?
Yes, I did answer this earlier. There is no hard assurance other than the fact that we have the support of NEIP. We have the support of other government stakeholders that we have spoken to who are in favor of this, as well as some of the private sector organizations. So what we can bank on is that we have a lot of support from within government. And so we hope that will push us through. But of course, nothing is 100% guaranteed.
No. Okay, thank you very much, Freda. And thank you also to all our guests and every single person who joined. If you have any more questions, you can tweet them at us, or you can go to Freda's direct Twitter page, or you can visit
GhanaStartupAct.org.
GhanaStartupAct.org for more information on the startup bill. And that's just about it. We'll be coming your way with more programs and more shows. So do stay tuned. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, Freda. Thank you, Ato, for joining us. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening. Bye.
You too.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Sure, you're welcome.